All right, everyone. Clearly, this is going to be something different today, as you can tell by the title of the video. Our last episode, we ranked the discography of the band Saigon Kick, which for the most part is all about the wonderful musician Jason Bieler. And as luck would have it, on the episode, we said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to get Jason Bieler on and talk to him? We haven't had a guest before, but Jason Bieler apparently is an amazing dude, and he reached out to me just to say thanks. Thanks for talking about the music. It was fun, and I just responded to him and said, "Hey, you want to be on the show?" and he responded with absolutely. And so what you're about to see right now is like an hour and 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less, of us just chatting with Jason Bieler about not only Saigon Kick, but the current stuff that he's doing, and just about music in general. It was a great chat. Eddie, you have anything to say before we move into the interview?
Interview was really fun. I had a hell of a good time, and I look forward to doing more in the future.
Yeah. Any other artists that are watching this that we've done their stuff, and you want to be able to
come on down
to spend an hour with us. We did pretty good for our first interview as a podcast. I think we did pretty damn good. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. So here it is, Cranked and Ranked, the first interview ever on Cranked and Ranked with Mr. Jason Bieler. There you go.
Enjoy it, dude.
There you go. Hey, Yo. Mr. Bieler.
Gentlemen, is that my lyrical collaborator, Eddie?
Yeah.
What an inspiration that was. I thought I was cutting edge, but then when I really heard the reinterpretation, I was like, this must happen.
Yeah, that'll be for the remix.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
First off, I got to say, you are a punctual motherfucker, and I appreciate that. So
only because I fear, growing up, I lived in a family that, on time was 10 minutes late.
Yes, and I absolutely agree. And so before we even start, I gotta let you know that if you watch the episode, then you probably know this, that you are the very first guest we've ever had on Cranked and Ranked.
Probably the last.
But yeah, we I don't know why we've never really thought about getting anybody on the show, because it's always just like us ranking stuff. And we've never really, occasionally we'll have those artists where we go, that'd be cool to talk to them, but it's never really a thing that's materialized. And so at this point, you've now made this a reality and created a new portion of our podcast.
Well, thank you. I mean, I have to say, you get links on occasion wherever you're watching, but you guys were frustratingly accurate with some of the descriptions. And I felt it warranted it seemed like a good time. So.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we've got some actual questions, interview style questions. But I figured that if for some reason we veer off into some, because a lot of our podcast episodes we start talking about completely unrelated shit for 10 minutes, and then we're absolutely fine with that.
Much like my life.
Well, much like a lot of your music, sometimes it just veers off into an area you weren't expecting.
You wander about aimlessly in the dark, hoping you don't bang your foot off the any furniture, and on occasion you make it where you're intending to go.
Yeah, which is cool. That's actually a nice place to begin, because I think that Eddie might have a similar question relating to this. But going back to, because our episode was about Saigon Kick, and I realize you've been doing a lot other music with more of your life than that small amount of time with Saigon Kick, but that was obviously what we were ranking. But the when you first got the band together and you first started putting songs together, was the intention for the music to have all these different elements, or did it just kind of happen organically that way?
It's been a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. In the sense that it actually, I think like you guys kind of alluded to, it makes more sense now I think, than it did, because I don't think anybody cares anymore. Like I remember, I'm obviously a little bit older than you guys, but I remember like, lunch, you sat with the new wave kids or you sat with the metal kids and you didn't socialize with anybody that wasn't in your exact wheelhouse of music. But growing up, I mean, I just listened to so many different types of things. So, I mean, obviously I loved the Beatles and I loved Ozzy and I loved, alternative music, and I loved the Fifth Dimension, and I loved Barry Manilow, and I loved Meshuggah, and I love Bjork, and I love, Tom Waits, Elvis Costello, Jane's Addiction, Queen. I mean, I just love music.
Yeah.
Best way to be.
And I felt really, I just couldn't be real about making any kind of music if I was going to sit up there and pretend like I was a hardcore metal dude, or that I was a pop dude, or that I was anything in particular, because it's just not true to who I am. I mean, I am in awe. I just like great music. So, I mean, I think as Miles Davis said, there's like two types of music, great and the other kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how
agree.
I feel.
And I think that my particular age group, because I was born in 78. And so by the time I was becoming a teenager, the way that music was unfolding around my group of friends, there really wasn't that division, because we were kids that got into metal. And then once the alternative scene started to spring up, we liked that as well. And then when the grunge shit happened, we liked that as well. And then all of a sudden we got into punk music. It was just this thing where we didn't really like have a division. We just sort of went wherever the music took us. And so I think that's why bands like yours, ended up resonating with me, because it just reminds me of that feeling of when I was young. And it's like, I would prefer to hear something that surprises me and is good than something that's like high quality, but it's kind of shit that I've already heard before. And so I think that's why it resonates with me.
I always attribute my originality to being a horrible rip-off artist. I'm so bad at ripping people off, it sounds almost original.
That's pretty interesting. I feel like because I've actually been a musician and songwriter, and so has Eddie. But I've been doing it since the mid '90s. But a lot of my stuff, I think that's where my sound came from. Was I didn't know how to do the stuff I wanted to do good enough, and I figured out my own way to do it. But for Eddie is 20 years younger than me even. So he's born in the late 90s, and he still somehow finds his way to Saigon Kick, which is pretty amazing. And so so is that something? I'm pretty sure that when you guys were making the first couple Saigon Kick albums, you weren't really thinking 30 years into the future about what the music was going to age like.
I mean, it all kind of happened backwards for Saigon Kick. I mean, I always wrote songs and spent a lot of time doing that. But we were in South Florida where there was no music scene, at the time, really, to speak of. I mean, it wasn't, we hadn't moved to LA, which kind of probably worked to our advantage, because we didn't have 100 bands at our rehearsal space doing this, what was happening at the time. And that inevitably seeps into how you think. And so we were kind of off in this weird area where it was like Miami Sound Machine, Tom Petty, Molly Hatchet off in the way distant. There's no interconnected, like a sound from there. And we didn't have a demo tape. We just started playing, and it's literally that story of like we played once and there was 20 people, and then we played again a month later and there was 40 people, and then it got to the point over a course of about a year and a half where we were drawing like 1,500 or 2,000 people, and like I was delivering sandwiches for a sub shop one day, and I was literally going to LA to record the debut record the next day. It happened like really kind of backwards, so there wasn't like shopping and tons of stuff like that. Michael Wagner, who had just finished, I think he had just finished a Skid Row record, and he had like 3 weeks between starting the next record. And he came down and saw us with Jason Flom, who's like this legendary A&R guy from Atlantic. And, if you don't know about him, you should definitely look up his ridiculously successful career. And they just sat there over dinner and were like, well, Mike Wagner's like, well, I can start on Monday if you want to do it. So like we literally like etched out literally on a napkin, like our manager at the time was like, okay, we'll do this. Basically, everybody cool. And we had flights and we were in LA doing the record. So we really kind of were allowed, whether it be of short notice time wise, but we were allowed to do what we did, just because we had no time to figure other things out or spend a tremendous amount of time in pre-production overthinking stuff. And Wagner was really great about that, because he's done so many mega huge records of the time. he was really adamant about like, I don't want to do anything to this. Like, I don't want this to be overthought, or I don't want you to change everything up, and just do what I saw kind of live and make it work like that. So it really kind of happened backwards. And I think luckily for us, in a kind of bubble of our own insanity.
Yeah. And so you were saying that it was done in 3 weeks time, the album?
We recorded that record actually in just under 2 weeks.
Wow. So because that does, to me as an outsider, it sounds like an album that took a long time, like just making sure everything sounded right. Because not only are the performances great, but just the sound of it is, everything's very well done. And so it seems like one of those records that you would hear the story of, oh, it cost the record label so much money and they spent a year in the studio, but it's not. It's a 2-week record. That's amazing.
We were squeezed in between like 2 massive other priority label records that Wagner was doing. He had a couple weeks off. We just got it done.
Awesome. Sorry.
Wow.
You all right?
Coffee went down the wrong way. Eddie, you want to take over with something?
Yeah. So there's kind of always been like a question burning on my mind about, Saigon Kick. And that was like this like retroactive thing. I mean, I don't know how retroactive it is, but it seems that in the lineage of like kind of hard rock music, Saigon Kick kind of gets unfairly categorized as like a glam band. Like you go on Wikipedia, they've got you as a glam band. But I mean,
don't let the gorgeousness fool you. There's a man of steel underneath this unbelievably attractive man.
Oh, totally. But yeah, I just wanted to know if like that was a thing at the time of like
I always hear people complain all the time about, like, I look at it this, like, we were lucky enough to have our moment and get into the music business, making the music we wanted to make. And if some guy in Wisconsin calls us glam metal on his list, I mean, there's a billion talented bands that don't even get on that list. Yeah, I don't spend my time like, if I was rightly categorized, it's like we did what we did. It was obviously a massive shifting time.
Yeah.
And we didn't help ourselves, in fairness, because we were so excited, and we were like 20 when the first record came out. So
wow.
I was just like, and the shift was happening, and bands like Alice in Chains saw it coming, and Pantera saw it coming, and kind of made their adjustments prior. We were like, what? We can go on tour with Rat? Like, yeah, like there was no like, well, you shouldn't associate, or that's going to come back to haunt you if you do this or that. And we just did what we did. And, I mean, I think like you guys mentioned it on the other tape, was just, Extreme is a band that you could say that about. And, King's X, there was a few of us that just got caught between these shifts. The funny part of it is, whatever it's hair, I don't mean hair metal as an insult. I mean, there's great bands, but I mean, the hair metal scene hated us with a white hot passion. And then once we had the ballad success, like we were untouchable by the entire, grunge and new scene. So we were kind of left, we kind of shish kebabbed ourselves in a weird way. So it is what it is.
On that note though, did the record label ever say anything about a difficulty marketing you, or was there even a discussion about that?
I mean, I always had a great relationship with Jason Flom, again, going back to him. And I remember him coming to the house and listening to demo, and he's like, I really have no fucking clue what you guys are doing. But just do what you do. I mean, I guess just do it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, so they weren't like trying to get us to do, and I mean, the ballad, I always felt it's really silly to like explain how having a hugely successful song was not part of your plan.
Yeah.
We were in Mexico shooting a video for Hostile Youth with the director who shot Jane's Addiction's Gift, like that whole documentary, thinking we were going to do all these. And it's like, there's like Santeria. We were like in the middle of the jungles of Mexico doing this insane thing. And we got a phone call, like this radio station in Florida started playing the ballad. And it just exploded, like literally overnight. It was one of those things where I remember getting, calls from like Doug Morris, who was head of the whole group at the time. He's like, "You guys have a hit, like, so you can either pursue it or try to pretend like it's not happening." But it's like, it was just selling ridiculous amounts of records, and it spread like like I guess you'd always dream of, except under different circumstances. Maybe not
Yeah.
that song at that time. I like to think we killed all of hair metal. It was like the last song. If it weren't for that ballad, grunge really would have never reached its peak because we took everybody out of the game. All the competition was done. There was no more ballads after that.
That's true. But you guys had to have known when that song was put together that it had potential, because it's one of those things where from a fan perspective, that being the first thing I ever heard you guys do, and I was one of those people that I had moved on to heavier music, but I heard that song and could not deny that it was great. And so it's, and I know it's different when you're the songwriter, but I mean, there was no feeling about that at all?
That's awesome to hear that. I mean, I really wander through life having no clue as to what I'm doing. And on occasion, people say really nice things. On occasion, people say terrible things. And, I just can't focus on that. That song, I mean, was literally written in 10 minutes. I have a demo of me like on a 12 string, and it pretty much came out as it was.
Wow.
And it just happened. But there was ballads on the first record too. They just weren't played. So it didn't, on the first record, we did shows with Faith No More, and we did shows with, the Godfathers, and we toured with the Ramones. So we were just caught in this really like crossfire of a bunch of stuff happening. But in fairness, I mean, we would have been a shitty grunge band. I mean, because it's just not, and not that we didn't have elements of that, but I couldn't have gone on stage and acted like the world sucks, man, and the man's. I couldn't have done that with any real feeling. So it would have probably failed miserably anyway.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, in a good way. I don't, it worked out.
Yeah. And I wonder, because last night I watched the video for Love Is on the Way Again, and I had a thought that I go, it doesn't really help it that the video also has more than words vibes to it. Like it does, it's still, guy singing with other guy with guitar doing background vocals. Like, oh, that's very more than words. But really, that's what you guys were doing anyway. It was, you guys had that same.
We toured with Extreme that whole time. So we went to their first European tour, I guess. We started at the Marquee, the old Marquee Club, right when that tour started. So it's like a 400-seat venue, and More Than Words blew up during that tour. So by the time we came back after 4 weeks of Europe, they were already selling out the Astoria. So we saw that whole launch, and I just didn't want to be derivative. So I said, look, in our video, the drummer's going to hit the cymbal one time. It'll be a completely different thing than having you guys sit on the couch with lighters. And there's kind of that audience that's sitting out there too. So including a little trivia, Paula Abdul's mom.
Oh, wow.
And even more twisted, the guy who shot the video is a legendary cinematographer. His name's Daniel Pearl. But he shot and filmed the entire Chainsaw Massacre, the first original movie, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense when you see the video.
Absolutely. But it's not to jump over to something else, but just and Eddie, if I'm jumping, you just stop me and say, I got something to ask, dude. Shut up.
No,
but because we were just talking about, you made the reference to you just kind of wandering around aimlessly, and whatever comes out of you, and that's the music that happened. And we, in the episode we did, I fully stopped the episode just so we could talk about one particular song, and that was the song On and On from Water. And that it baffles me, because that is a song that you may have heard it on the episode. I feel like if you were the kind of songwriter that you were just okay with writing a song and giving it to other artists to do, I feel like that could have been somebody's massive hit, and you put it on this album that's a very eclectic album. And so when you do something like that, obviously we've already had to discuss that you don't really hear things that like they have this huge potential, but when you're writing all these different styles of songs, has it ever occurred to you about writing for somebody else, or have you written for somebody else?
I would. I mean, I don't, I've just, I kind of built my own sandbox with my own toys. Yeah. And people are welcome. And it was really great, not to jump ahead to the solo record I just did last year. and the stuff. But it was amazing to have all these different people from all these different backgrounds, whether it's like, Clay Cook from the Zac Brown band and Clint from Seven Dust and Devin Townsend and Butch Walk, all these people from all these different walks of, musical life.
Yeah.
All come into that box and kind of mess around with my toys, so to speak. It was really, really fun. I would definitely collaborate. It's not that I don't. It's just hasn't really been something I focus. I just keep doing what I do, and I keep doing it.
I just always hear that song, and I think because there are songs that eventually become somebody's really popular song, and then nobody knows that it was once on somebody else's album. Like a good example is there's that Natalie Imbruglia song "Torn" that was a gigantic hit, but that was somebody else's song on another album years before. So I'm like, well, why can't On and On why can't we give it to like some pop group now and they do their own version of it?
You have my permission. If you turn this into like "I Will Always Love You" for Dolly Parton into Whitney Houston, or if you want to
or that
any of those type of things.
Yeah,
feel free to Kate Bush me if you'd like to.
Honestly, on the episode, I say, we should get on TikTok and start, using that song, only to find that song is not on TikTok. So, but if it's ever on there,
on the foot again.
But if it's ever on there, because that's how shit's blowing up, is that kids just all start using the same song, and then all of a sudden it has this huge spike in popularity, and I'm like, I think that's one that could happen to, but
Totally.
I got to call Atlantic up and see what they're doing with the catalog licensing if it not being on TikTok.
Speaking of that, when they do these reissues of stuff, like I got record store day reissues on vinyl, of the first album, and I haven't been able to find the Lizard because it was out of stock when I went to go get it. But do you have any? Do they come to you and say these are happening, or do you just find out and go, oh, they're releasing this on vinyl? Great.
There's two things about that, and I know I'm in the minority. They have spoken to me, and it's really flattering. I always feel like, for the most part, they are cash grab fan ripoffs. Just for the most part, it's like, and I get it, and but people do like collecting vinyl, and there wasn't a lot of it around at the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, if it means something to the fans, I'm all for it. But I just hate the whole remaster, reissue, one, release that was only ever out in Guam. That's like a 4-track that the guy did in his bedroom, and now they charge $50 for the vinyl. To me, it's like, most of it is these new departments at record companies trying to, go through the skeletons and find valuable bones that might have been left over. So there's a team of people that just go through and find these ways of doing stuff. I mean, they've approached me about it. I mean, it just, Chris, bass player in Saigon Kick, has had more dialogue. And it's not even that I'm against it as much. It just doesn't hold really much interest to me. I mean, when I'm older, I might sit back and want to, rehash all the past stuff. And I don't mean it to not to discount how much a lot of that stuff means to some people.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just personally worried about what's next. I mean, you guys are songwriters. So if you're like me, the best possible time in the music is when you hit the space bar, because we're all recording digitally, and you finish that song.
Yeah.
And no one's heard it but you. So you haven't gotten that good feedback or bad feedback, but you are just enamored with what you finished.
Yeah.
That's like the best part of making music to me. Everything else after that just screws it up.
We've said it several times on the show as well. It's come up as like a topic of like bands re-recording a whole album that they'd done in the past. And I kind of feel like once it's kind of out there, that's how it, is. So when I see a band put out a completely re-recorded, let alone remixed album, I'm kind of like, it was probably done out of some sort of contractual obligation or something, because I know some bands have done that.
Yeah. What actually happens is, after a certain amount of time, like all these old record contracts had re-record restrictions. So like I couldn't record like the first Saigon Kick record and then re-record it in 5 years and release it again. So they kind of stopped me from doing that music. But after like, I think depending on your deal, 7 years, 12 years, you can re-record those songs again as the songwriters. So a lot of them are like, for the first time, a lot of those bands can get actual revenue from those records by re-recording them.
Yeah.
Right.
And make money because they're in debt to the record companies and they're never going to see any royalties and stuff like that. So a lot of it's driven by that. But I'm with you. even if you make like this first Saigon Kick record, for me, like there's things I hear about it, and just as anything anybody releases that you're just like, oh, this could have been like that. But if I were to re-record that whole record today, and think I crushed it, and the sounds are better, and the guitar tones are better, and the vocal things we did to fix it, it's like everybody would hate it, because records are of a time when they mean something to you, and the way they sound it's all part of that, how it hits you at the time. So better is not always better when it comes to like that, or especially musical memories. You want to hear things the way it hit you when you were 12, when you were 18, when you were 25, when that girl threw you out of the house, whatever. Like that's what those sonic things mean, and that's as important as anything to do with the quality.
It's the same. I mean, it's the same thing, where in I guess it was the 80s and early 90s, where you would see colorized versions of black and white movies. And eventually that became a thing. We're like, no, why are we doing that? I was like, well, yeah, why are we doing that with music? Because honestly, I am guilty of being one of those people that I just want all the albums I love on vinyl, no matter what. But if I could choose, I'd be like, no, don't touch it. Take the original tapes, put it on vinyl. Don't remaster it. Don't fix anything. If there's a mistake, I love that mistake. Please leave it there. And so that's the kind of thing that I would love. But I also understand there's a really high profile version of somebody, re-recording their stuff in order to gain some control. And that's fucking Taylor Swift. Like she's just re-recording her own shit because she doesn't have control of the old shit. And I absolutely get it. But if I was a Taylor Swift fan, I'd probably still be like, I kind of like the way the old one sounds.
I mean, that's the thing as musicians, it's an unfortunate world we live in, but nobody gives a shit like the way we do.
Yeah.
So it's like a fan's just going to hear that's the same song I heard before. And it's just like, people aren't having these intricate conversations of the legality and the motivations and whether Taylor's right or the record company's right or who screwed who. They just, that sucks or that's great, or, whatever it is. And I think sometimes we can get in the way of overthinking that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that's even more aggravating for me is music from the time of Saigon Kick and around that time. Already, it still sounds good today anyway, for the most part, to the point where, there was a morning where I was driving to school with my daughter, who's 11 years old, and I was playing her old Beatles songs. And she's like, these things, that sounds really old. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, the whole process of recording was way different. And so this is from the 60s. This sounds old. And then I was like, hold on. How old do you think Smells Like Teen Spirit is? And she's like, I don't know, 10 years. And it's like, but that's how good that shit sounds. And so it's even more frustrating to be like, well, if it already sounds that good, why are we fucking with it? It's like,
but I mean, to your point though, I mean, this is just my opinion. If you re-recorded those old Beatle records and made them sound, they would suck. I mean, the part of the magic is the way they are, and that they are of that time, and that, or those early Queen records, that had to bounce a billion things off of 8 tracks and make these different things happen. I mean, that's kind of the signature of that. But we have hit this technological arc where everything sounds good to a certain degree. I mean, you very rare. I mean, this is not a challenge by any means, but I mean, you don't hear a tremendous amount of sonically horrible shit like you used to, because it was such an art form before. I mean,
if you're talking about the world of metal, I hear some sonically horrible shit all the time.
But I mean, I should say everybody now has the ability to record well.
And so the stuff that you're doing now, just to touch on it for a second, because I'll go more into it in a little bit. But the stuff you're doing now, are you recording it on your own, like on your own equipment and everything? Because the stuff that you're doing, I'm assuming that you've just gotten really good at it over the years, but it doesn't sound like somebody sitting in their room recording it. It sounds there's an organic quality to it that sounds great. So
thanks.
Kudos for that.
First, I mean, I've had a ton of gear over the years. I mean, I had a studio for a long time after Saigon Kick, and I had the ability to work with some amazing producers and produce a bunch of really cool bands. I mean, bands like that I got to work with on our label was like Skin Dread, Sick, Nonpoint, Onkla, Fiction Plane, the Death Stars. So I had this whole 10 or 15 year period where I was involved in the production side and studio side and all that kind of stuff. So only got kind of, hopefully got slightly better, and, learning it, what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get things to sound a little bit better. But it's still, I think it's like, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. You listen to something that you've done and you're like, oh, that's, and then you put on someone else's record and you're like, oh, I suck. So
Yeah.
it just sounds, why can't it sound like the Meshuggah record? Or why can't it sound like,
I am my own worst enemy, especially now. Like, I'm literally sitting on 11 songs that I have written and recorded completely, except for I am having writer's block with lyrics. And every time I try to do it, I just go, this is not good enough. And so literally these completed songs have been sitting on my hard drive for now almost a year. and I just can't get past this block. And it's only because of that very thing, where I'll write something and I'll hear something else and go, fuck, I just can't do it. I'm not good at it.
What I did that I found was super helpful right after the kind of label thing finished. So over the last maybe 5 years ago, I started it. Because I was just tired of sitting in a room and spending 3 years on a snare reverb.
Yeah.
Like that was like no one ever heard anyway. Everyone's going to listen on, a little.
Eddie's like, worth it.
Yeah.
For the one guy that hears it, it's great. But I found myself also, because of having all the tools available to us, all the time, I have an idea and then I'd go off on a tangent down some like synth thing that or ambient delay taps, and I forgot the song.
Yeah.
Before by the time I figured out the delay setting I wanted, the song was gone. So I said about 5 years ago, I said, I'm just going to do this writing experiment where I'm going to write, record, release, mix, and put it out on Bandcamp in 24 hours, like from beginning to end, like purely because I wanted to not get stuck. And I wanted to keep sharpening myself as a writer. And the only way to really do that is to move on. You're going to have stuff that's not as good as other stuff. And that's just the nature of, and a lot of times the stuff that you didn't think was the good stuff winds up being the better stuff, when you look back. But long story short is I released about 150, 180 songs on this Bandcamp thing, with no commercial aspirations other than just to get better and just maybe sharpen the tools at writing and get to the point quicker and not get lost in all those production elements. So even if you don't release it, that could be a cool experiment, just to like, what can I do in 24 hours? What can I do in 48 hours? And move on and then come back to it.
Funny enough, the song that you hear at the beginning of our episodes, that is a song that I wrote and recorded in one day and put out. And it's all right, but one section of it was good enough to where Eddie was like, "That's great," and I was like, "All right, well, we'll use it as the intro to our show."
I think it's a great song, start to finish. But that breakdown, it just struck me like that's the theme song. Like,
We're the worst judge of our own stuff, and that's why I figure, I generally kind of know what I do, like, and I feel comfortable, doing what I do, but like I never know, like in terms of what song's going to work, or this song's going to be big, or that song's going to connect with people, and or everyone's going to hate this song for sure, or I just focus on trying to be as creative as possible and move on and stay focused on I don't mean to discount the Saigon Kick stuff.
Yeah.
And I love hearing about it. It's great. But from my perspective, like, people are always asking me, what's your favorite song from The Water? And I'm like, I haven't listened to them in years. Like, I don't, not because they're not good or I've moved on. It's just, I'm always trying to move forward. I'm always trying to think of something next. And I don't personally feel, I love the fact that people love Saigon Kick. That's awesome. But, and I'm sure you feel the same way about your stuff. But I don't feel like I'm as good as I can be yet. Like, when you're an athlete, you have a window of opportunity where, all right, you're 25, you're 30, 35, you're pushing it, but you're pushing up against a time where you're not going to be better than you were.
Yeah.
As a musician, that's the great thing, is like, you can just keep getting better, and better doesn't mean sell more records. I may or may never be in that, world again of, gold and platinum records. No, who is, but better for where you're like, wow, that is exactly what I meant to do and how I meant it to come across, and what I had in my head really is on that tape, for me. Like I talked about, when you hit the space bar, I'm like, that's what I meant. That's what I envisioned. Yeah. And that to me is like, you can always get better at that.
Yeah. Do you have anything, Eddie? Because if not, I have a segue from this, but you can, if you can jump in.
Well, this kind of could tie in. Do you have any songs that you particularly love or hate playing live in the past that stick out to you, or in the present that stick out to you from maybe like maybe not even that you don't like playing it, it's just a bitch to play live or something. I don't know.
Well, what's funny is like I haven't done really any shows for this Baron von Bielski Orchestra,
Mhm.
except I did one show at Prague Power Festival. For some reason, that record got a whole new audience for me, which is fantastic. Like I'm like all of a sudden like Prague Mag UK and all these people were really really kind, which was nice, but it brought in a whole bunch of like people that had no idea about my past. And when we went to go do this show, because it was just was one festival show, I was like, holy shit, I had never sang and played these songs like ever. So when I was trying to like play them, I can't do the show now. Like I don't know how I can't. This riff is like completely independent of the vocals. So it took a little bit to like figure out how to play and sing some of those tunes. But I generally don't. I think the only thing that makes it or breaks it is if you play in front of a crowd that's just dead for whatever the reason may be. I still always ultimately say it's my fault. But if you're not feeling any connection with people and it's just you could be playing Stairway to Heaven and it's going to suck, or Master of the Puppets, it's just going to be like, oh, if people are into it, you can see people are excited. Man, I'm pretty happy playing anything.
Yeah,
Usually.
that's
Cool.
That's a good segue. We'll touch back on Saigon Kick, but let's get current because I have questions about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Because the current thing is it's interesting because it's the Bear Sedatives EP, but this thing has grown in a really interesting way, and I don't know if this was intentional, where it was like Human Head. Here's a single called Human Head. And now here's a new single that has one more song plus Human Head. And it's grown and grown and grown until now it's an EP, which is Bear Sedatives of 5 songs. And so the two questions are, number one, did you intend to have that sort of building process? And the second part of that question is this building to a full length?
Yes, there'll be a full record in early next year.
Sweet.
That'll come out. That'll have I tend to put a lot of songs on records, but probably like 15, 16 songs.
Okay.
And this was something like, I hate the idea. I mean, I kind of love in both worlds. I mean, I like a record, but even if you look at behind the curtain of the records, no one listens to the record anymore. Like you watch the arc of like song 1, song 2, song 3, song 4. So it bothers me that sometimes, especially the way I make music, like it doesn't mean that I put it 10th, that it's the 10th, the 10th worst song on the record.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's there, but people don't have the attention span. So this was kind of a way of like releasing a song. Everybody's got time to digest that one song. If you're a fan, I mean, if I have even things I'm a fan of, it's sometimes hard to sit down and listen to 10, 12 songs at a time. But like if Jane's Addiction did a record with the Beatles and they were releasing a song, even the Foo Fighters did it. They would release a couple, and people have a lot more, just the nature of how people live and digest anything. It's easier, I think, song by song. And it's kind of interesting for me because I get more feedback about that thing before I release the next one. Not that I change course, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like people really did or did not relate to that. And I thought they were, and so you get more kind of real-time feedback. And I don't think we can afford as musicians to just disappear for 2 or 3 years anymore. At least, if you're the Foo Fighters, you can. But I mean, when you're, an artist that's kind of got a niche and you're developing and, you want to kind of be in people's consciousness of having, stuff happening at least every couple months or you disappear.
And so, and because the stuff that's on there is great. The songs for the Apocalypse is also really great. But for this project or whatever, calling it the Baron von Bielski Orchestra, is there a reason why you kind of went with that instead of just being Jason Bieler or whatever?
Well, one, I love hearing everybody pronounce it wrong. That's my favorite part of every interview I did. You got it right. You did it right. I'm saying, but generally it was always like, Baron von Bueller's Orchestra, Baron von. So that just personally cracks me up. And then I mean, I think it was just, it kind of gave me license to do anything and work with anybody and go off in any direction I wanted to. If it's just me, then it's kind of just me and people have expectations of it not that anybody has expectations. I mean, I guess it could have worked that way too, but I just love this kind of, it's funny. I heard you guys talking about Matt Berry,
Yeah.
personal hero, and Toast of London has got to be the greatest show like of all time. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
Yeah, I have. And he's an insanely talented musician as well.
So, like, but I love that whole like insanity of like, if you look in nobody does, but half that record, my favorite part is it's all made up musicians that don't exist with these insane names. And I was doing interviews with people and they asked, because anytime I program something or if I played bass on something, I just made up a name of some insane like Finnish, shepherd who was a hemp farmer, and I met him in like Norway, whatever it is. And there's all these insane like kind of twists and turns. That I think under that name, there's a Monty Python-esqueness to just no rules, and I don't care. I mean, anything that seems like a good giggle is fantastic.
Yeah, and it works too, because if you're looking at it under that name, and then you see because currently what we have, that 5-song Bear Sedatives EP, it's 5 very unique songs, but for some reason under that kind of umbrella, you're like, I mean, it makes sense, the fact that and I don't know, it's very cool to hear because eventually we'll get to we'll have to talk about the stepchild of the Saigon Kick albums, where I was a little bit nasty to the album.
No, man, but look, in hindsight, I thought that was spot on. I mean, it really was a spot on critique of it. I mean, it was that we, part of it was that we had a record obligation still to this Japanese label who had signed us. And I had already moved on and was trying to do something new. And it got so convoluted. You'd need like another 3-hour podcast, but I wound up doing a record with Jack Joseph Puig, who did the Jellyfish records, the producer. It's an insanely brilliant guy. And then it got hung up and we dropped, and then we were making another record, and then it wound up getting on the American Pie soundtrack. But yeah, I had definitely tried to put that stuff, but then I got stuck in the middle of 2 different shifts. And, I don't believe in just, if you sign a deal to a company or they invest in you in any way, you just can't like take off and go like, no, now I'm doing bluegrass. They expected a record, and so we kind of finished it, but it definitely, I don't think it sounds anything like not purely like a Saigon Kick record. I appreciate that people were limitedly, but marching in the streets with pitchforks and flames and Kill Bieler kind of the parade. I may have taken part in a few of them.
But the comparison there was essentially that in the grand scheme of us ranking Saigon Kick, which is largely songs that you wrote, and then we get to Bastards, it gets to an area where I'm like, well, as a fan, I'm like, this is not what I want, and it seems like somebody else is doing this. But the comparison I was going to make is that what you've been doing over the past few years here, it's like the things that I love about your songwriting, the unexpectedness of it. But even then, and I think I said this on the podcast too, there's an unexpected quality, but there's also a familiar quality. So it's got this weird thing where it's almost like you're being eased into a situation where you may not know where it's going, but you feel like you're in good hands. And so that's why I like what you're doing now, because it reminds me of how it feels listening to those first few Saigon Kick albums.
In fairness, those records you're talking about, Bastards record and the Super Transatlantic record with after that, I mean, that was a really strange, untethered time for me. Like, you spent time doing something that you were proud of, and you created both the first 2 records and the Water record, and you feel like there's no home for it. You're still relatively young. It's a weird thing to be 27 and feel like, I guess it's all over. And I got a Walmart reader. So you definitely can be under the pressure of like, I wasn't mentally strong enough not to rethink, like, am I doing something wrong here? Maybe I should be like these other bands and try to write more contained pop rock stuff. Because walking into a record company in 1999 going, hey, I'm the guy from Saigon Kick, did not help. That wasn't like a shit, let's take a meeting with that guy. So you try to distance yourself. And I mean, I think there's some good songs on those records. For sure. I mean, I don't apologize for them, but I definitely can look back now with some time and go like, that was a little more untethered, a little more untrue to who I am, maybe a little more, let me write rock songs that connect with people kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm back to, I don't give a shit. You know,
Yeah.
No, I love hearing that people like them, but it never crosses my mind anymore because that, you know, of all the things that didn't work, that didn't work the most, you know, in terms of like connecting with people. Because the strange thing is, I think, you know, it's this magical thing of intent that even non-musicians can tell.
Mhm.
There's a stench of fear when you're trying to make something happen.
Yeah.
And people just naturally don't resonate with that, regardless of how good it sounds or how well crafted it is. It still has this carcass, this, you know, this on the side of the road festering carcass, you know, smell to it that people pick up on. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I thought your point was super fair.
But I do think that was a thing, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, where I almost feel like people that had been doing it at that point for 10 years or even longer, it felt like some of them were just like, well, it gets to be not fun overthinking things so much. So it's fun to maybe right now do music that just sort of comes out and is just sort of, we're not trying to be super creative. We're just trying to have a good time. And I absolutely understand that, because I've been through phases where I wrote things and was in bands. I've been in bands that, like, in hindsight, I'm all like, I should not have been in that band because I did not want to do that music. but it was just one of those things that just ends up happening in your life or whatever.
Well,
But
fortunately for you, that band wasn't big enough
no,
where everybody knows what you did.
nobody knows. Literally nobody outside of Austin, Texas ever heard of the shit that I did.
But I think we can all, and I'm sure you've done the same thing, Eddie, in your career. I mean, it's like, I'm sure you can look back and go, but I'm better for having done it. Like, if nothing else, it's made me more confident in going this way because I know what happened when I did that. You know, you got, you know, I had the and it's good fortune, but I had the good fortune of having some people paying attention to Saigon Kick and then paying attention to what I did next, going, what the fuck is this guy doing? You know, I didn't get to make that mistake or experiment, you know, under the radar. I kind of, you know, was like flailing about. And there's so many things that happened, you know, between Matt leaving after the Lizard record and then doing the Water record and having all the, you know, we did that in isolation in Stockholm. So we were around nobody. So this just seemed like, hey, we'll just make a record. You know, there was no like record company guys coming in like, what'd you do? You kicked out the blonde front man, you know, of our mega opera. We kind of did all this stuff in isolation. So, but then that transitioning and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the thing that seems to always work for me in terms of just being happy is just whatever I feel like doing. And some of it might connect and some of it might not. But
yeah. And it's interesting too, talking about these kind of things, because you're a little older than me. I'm older than Eddie, and Eddie, right, has just started a new actual band. And from what I'm gathering from the stuff that you're playing me, you guys are also going down a route where you're not really tied to one particular kind of thing that you're trying to do. And so it's almost like I'm interviewing Eddie now. It's like hearing all these things, hearing guys like us talk about music, where you have, you know, Jason, who experienced some success, and me, who experienced none. And do you, in 2022, how does it feel being in a new band?
I mean, I feel like I have, you know, the insight of, you know, I'm on a podcast, obviously, where we listen through the discographies of bands and things and whatnot. But like, if there's one thing it's given me, it's just a bunch of insight and knowledge and things to apply to this sort of stuff. And I think it's good to, especially nowadays, not be pigeonholed to any one thing, because, you know, it's reached a point now where music is, you know, algorithmically recommended to people via streaming and things like that. So we just kind of wanted to be our own thing, and we just do, obviously it's like hard rock, heavy metal stuff. But you know, if we want to do a grunge song, we'll do a grunge song. We want to do a death metal riff, we'll stick that in there. But nowadays,
as long as you do it true, like you're saying, as long as you do it because you want, you know, as long as there's never like a, let's sit down at a table and get a PowerPoint display going and find out, then you're done. You know, but I mean, if you feel like doing, I mean, that's the main the whole thing. I mean, it really is the whole thing. And because you just can't control, you don't know as much as people think they know, what's going to connect or what's going to work or what's going to, change your life. We live in an awesome time in the sense that you could record a new song with your band, and at 4 a.m, some kid in Korea starts playing it. And the next thing you know, you wake up the next week and you have a billion plays because of a TikTok thing. And so anything can happen.
Yeah.
But I think the fundamentals are still the same. Just look, at the end of the day, a great song was a great song. And that's been true of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It's the one true thing is if it's great, it's great. I've been with a ton of different musicians of all different genres. And when a badass song comes on or a badass musician plays, I don't care what you're into, everybody sits back and goes, that's the real deal.
Yeah, I agree.
That's always been true, so.
Awesome.
Do you have anything else to ask, Eddie?
I've got another question here, and it's kind of like a hypothetical scenario. If you had to listen to like one 10-year span of music, say for example me, I would probably go for something like 1984 to 1994. What would you pick? I mean, I know you're a guy who moves forward and doesn't get like too hung up on the past, but I feel like if you had to pick like maybe like 10 years of influences, what springs to mind?
It's so hard for me because it's a great question. Just because there's so many things, like I'm going to say the last 10 years, only because of my music, not necessarily they were released in the last 10 years, but things that I've discovered in the last 10 years has kind of been the most interesting, because of Spotify and because of these wormholes that are at our, that when as a kid, I mean, it was like, one guy in your neighborhood would mention this band Kiss and you'd be like, what? And then it would take like a month before like one kid's older brother had a record. Yeah. And then you all sit around and it took like 2.5 years to become a fan and know who each guy was by the time you got a magazine with them in it. And now it's so instantaneous. Like I can go and, my son's a musician and plays drums, and he can go and watch Neil Peart do something in Rush, and then hear Neil Peart talk about Buddy Rich, and then hear Buddy Rich talk about Gene Cru, and like in 15 minutes, he's done what would have taken me 10 years of musical discovery. But there's so many cool things happening in terms of like underground jazz stuff, underground metal stuff. That I think are pushing the envelope again. I'm a little bored of music that kind of, I know what's going to happen. I mean, there's something reassuring about it. I mean, I don't mind it. I love Taylor Swift. Great pop song is a great pop song when it's done well. But I find myself becoming more addicted to, like, I never saw that coming. I didn't think this was going to happen. Or, the song's 9 minutes long. And, or, that's the stuff I kind of go like, I like to be pushed and think, and it makes me rethink stuff. So, over the last 10 years, whether it be bands like, Jaga Jazzist or, Meshuggah or Gojira or, there's so many cool things happening that I obviously the 70s, how do you not talk about Zeppelin and the Beatles and Queen, and the 80s? I mean, the whole new wave thing, how do you not talk about the, U2 and, and the 90s or something, it's really hard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good answer though, because, for me, I have a few like personal hang-ups that, again, it will probably take a whole other like 3-hour therapy session podcast for me to debunk that. But for me, I've always found that there's just this like sweet spot with like songwriting, production, and just all-round vibe of that like 84 to 94 like decade. But I definitely am coming around to a lot more modern music nowadays, especially, and I think that just comes with A, maturity, and B, getting deeper into whatever.
It's upon you as a musician, I think, and that I just had this conversation because I do a 2-man show with me and Jeff Scott Soto. I don't know if you know Jeff, but Jeff sang for Ingve back, brilliant, like one of the great metal singers of all time. and we literally go around and do these shows. So we're in the car, and he was playing these AM Gold playlists, like of these, and the songwriting craft was unbelievable. Like, and how much more intense their chord structures were. Like, and how their sense of, like, so you can listen to that and go, there's got to be 1,000 bands that I couldn't tell you the name of, but songs I knew for sure from being a kid, hearing them. And I think it's upon us, like, to, it's like funny because I didn't know the Zac Brown band. I knew Clay via social media, the guitar player in the band.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I really had no idea how big they were. And my son was all excited, like, oh, he's going to invite you to the show. We're going to go see him. I was like, cool. I figured we're going to go see him at a pub. I don't know. They're playing like a stadium, practically sold out. And, when I went there, not knowing any of it, there's a reason they're that big. And there's a reason why these songs are successful. It's up to you as a musician to either go, screw it, that's this or that. But 9 times out of 10, if it's not just purely a novelty thing, there's a reason why songs work or certain artists are big. Whether it's Maiden, Metallica, it's usually not by accident.
I do have kind of a devil's advocate other view on some of it with modern music, because from my point of view, there are those artists out there that the song is great or they're very talented and it's undeniable. But I feel like some of it almost seems like some artists get to a point where they're popular enough to where they become celebrities, and then people are jumping on top of that because they love celebrities. And so you see these people that, like, a really good example is like Harry Styles. He's a guy that's doing stuff out there now. Yeah. And he's very talented, and he becomes very popular, but I almost feel like he's great, but he's only like this level great, but he's grown even further because now people are like, well, now he's a celebrity. I want to go to the concert to watch a celebrity on stage. And so there's that part of me that goes, are the songs really that good? Should he be selling out multiple nights in the same arena? Is it? And so it's an interesting, like, push and pull in my brain with that kind of stuff.
There's a couple. I mean, look, I think Watermelon Sugar High is a great jam.
Yeah.
It's not. I wouldn't say it inspired me to become a musician, but I can listen to that song and go, that's a well-crafted pop tune.
Yeah.
In the pop world, when you couple that with a compelling personality, good-looking guy, girl, whatever, interesting fashion sense, in a world where TikTok and Instagram and all that, I mean, it's just an accelerant beyond accelerant.
Yeah. Would
it have happened to that degree if he was a 300-pound guy living in his mom's basement?
Probably not.
maybe not that, but I like to think that we would maybe hear that song and go, oh man, that's a good song.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
When you can put it all together, I think it works.
With modern music, I'm like you, or I'm constantly, I get frustrated because I'm always looking for stuff that surprises me. But I'm also, I'll admit that I'm also pretty limited in what is actually pleasing to me, because there's I like heavy music. I can't find my way down in the bluegrass or jazz or other things like that, because there's something that just doesn't connect to me, even if I hear it and I go, well, that's pure talent right there. It doesn't draw me into the music. So that's my own problems with that. But I was trying to get to something, because you're talking about like newer artists that are kind of surprising to you. And I don't know if you've heard this, but I figured you may have, because their album was produced by Devin Townsend, but there's a band called Four Stroke Baron. And
I heard them.
So Four Stroke Baron are like a progressive metal band, but they're really kind of odd in the way they present it. And the vocalist, for lack of a better comparison, he reminds me of Roland Orzabal from Tears for Fears. So if you take that kind of vocal on top of this really sprawling, progressive, heavy music, but also very emotional, and it's so, and Devin Townsend put his stamp on it, where there's all kinds of really interesting production things here and there. And that's the one thing in the past, like, it's got to be in the past 10 years that has come out, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is. I saw the album cover and I go, this could go either way. And it just totally floored me. I'm like, I was not expecting this, and it's amazing. And so that's what I'm constantly looking for. But unfortunately, that kind of shit seems
Yeah, I mean, you
fewer
gotta
and farther between.
you gotta stay open, and I think, and just because, I mean, that's the negative thing about age. It's
Yeah.
very tempting to get comfortable. This is my chair. This is the way I hear things. This is the song I want to hear. It's very easy. So if anything, that muscle of like being open to things you're not familiar with, that's what I think pop music works, because it's people, the average person does not want to be surprised on their way to work in the morning to go work at their job as a secretary. She doesn't want to hear Miles Davis or atonal music or a 45-minute, Meshuggah breakdown. That's not what they want to hear. So, and you can't, we live in a society where, I mean, the vast majority of people's input, that's why these superhero movies, they're well shot, but mass amount of dumb people want to see the same shit. They don't want to be surprised at all. Like that's, if you do anything interesting in a movie, there'll be a mutiny. Like, wait a minute, he didn't get the girl? Like, you can't, so understanding that, I mean, and I don't begrudge them that. People have a right. Life is hard enough that if you get happy listening to, a great Billie Eilish pop tune, that's just as valuable as Miles Davis. I mean, it's serving, that's what it serves. It as long as it means something who's listening to it and makes them get through this horrid world we live in with, every time you turn on the news, something else horrible is going on. It's, so if a song can make you not think about that, that's about as magic a moment as we can create as an artist. That
is a really great, because a lot of it these days with me has to do with escape. And that's why a lot of it has, on my channel, on the Old Head channel, so much of my stuff is nostalgia. And it's only because that gives me this escape from so much shit that's going on in the modern world. And so that's a really good way to put it. So
I was just chiming in there.
So I guess we can probably wrap it up here pretty soon. Do you have another question, Eddie?
No, I just happy to see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, no, this has been great. The one thing that I was going to ask you that I feel like I probably won't get what I want out of you, because you made the reference earlier to that you have not listened to this Saigon Kick albums for many, many years. But I was going to ask, just from your memory and what went into making them and the feeling that you have now, even this separated from them, since this is cranked and ranked, how would you rank the Saigon Kick albums?
Well, I thought you did a great job.
Okay.
So I can't argue with your list.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, there was a weird, the Lizard record was a record where the label, because of the time we had to do it in, and, again, going back to Jason Flom, sat down with me and he was like, why don't you produce the record? So part of me was going, I don't know how to produce a record. The other part of me is going, if I don't say yes, I'm never going to produce a record, because I just have to figure this out. So there was a joy of that kind of like, and it was prior to Google, so you couldn't even Google how to produce a record. There's no YouTube videos. Can I see an interview with somebody who knows what so but having worked with Michael Wagner was a huge learning process, and then taking that and going and making that record. There's a lot of fun about that. The Water record was such a creative moment in terms of just the joy of making the record. There was just no rules, and there was just, not that there was ever rules, but it was literally like we were in Stockholm by ourselves again. And so it was really just us in the studio with the engineer, with no one around. We didn't have friends for the most part hanging out. So it was just in the studio, locked out, everything mic'd up all the time, and just going nuts. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, I think everybody's got their, it's always great to hear that record resonates with people. there's just these camps of like, the first record's the best record, the second record's the best record. And I'm just glad that anybody likes any of the records, and that to be a part of any of it is awesome. It's hard. I mean, but I guess from the creative freedom of the Water record was a lot of fun to make. Just on a not that it's a better record. It was a lot of the process was really, really creative and fun.
Sounds it for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's that. I mean, I would agree. Like there are things about that record that it just sounds like there was such a freedom that it had to have been a really pleasing experience. So yeah, I guess from an outside perspective, whenever you hear like a member of a band leaves, you always in your brain go, oh, they must have all been really unhappy then, or something like that.
We broke records in interband hatred. It was not musical differences on any level. I think that, not pigeonholing anybody, I think the Lizard had a footprint of success for us. And, people felt that we should become more of a Skid Row rock, like just get those riffs going and do that thing. And I felt completely the opposite way. Yeah. And didn't want to make, I like the fact that there's, the Lizard and Hostile Youth and those songs, but I would literally kill myself if I had to make a record of 10 of that.
Yeah.
It was just for me. And in fairness, we would have been a way bigger band at that time had we just done 10 versions of that type of thing.
But on the same token, we would probably not be here talking about it in the same respect that we are now. So,
right. That's the cool thing about, talking to different people is just, those records are starting to resonate more now with people than I think they did at the time. People I care about, musicians and, people that I respect their opinions. Like all of a sudden you're starting to see those records kind of, whether it's because of the reissues or whatever, people are like coming around, and I'm starting to hear really nice things about all the records, which is just, super cool.
Yeah. One last note, because I know that there will be Saigon Kick fans that are watching this or listening to this, and they probably hate me if I didn't ask, because several years ago there were Saigon Kick shows with Matt Kramer on vocals. What is the relationship with him like at this point? And has there ever been talk of any other shows or anything else with you two together?
I don't think that'll ever happen again. And I'm not one to talk negatively about anybody. Sure. Because it's just, I'm sure he can go online and say a bunch of terrible things too. So I don't think this is a place for that, but it's just never going to work. Okay. I mean, it's, I equate it to like one of those things where I can only imagine it's like, if you had a girlfriend like 20 years ago and you had a horrible breakup, just horrible. Right. And then you wind up at some convention hotel like this year and you see her from across the room and somehow you wind up, oh, hey, well, how you doing? And why don't we just grab a bite to eat real quick and, catch up? And you're sitting across the table and you're like, oh my God, like what? This was the greatest. I mean, I just love this. Everything about her. She's so stimulating. She's brilliant. She's funny. She's charming and everything's going great. And then next morning you see her for breakfast and she says one thing and you're like, oh my God, there she is. Now it's all coming back to me why, and that's, I'm sure everybody can say that on either side, but it's just one of those things where that's perfect. Because like that being said, if somebody came to me and said, hey, that girl you dated 20 years ago, we want you to go on tour with her, I'd be like, no. I'm the first person. I mean, I was friends with all those guys at the time. And, as a Skid Row fan, I'm like, dude, I want to see Sebastian. I want to see that whole thing happen.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely.
As a friend of Scotty, who's a guitar player in that band, I totally I understand a quality of life for everybody involved, a quality of life for Matt, not dealing with me, quality at some point, it just becomes about having fun and doing what you want to do. And if that can bring you joy, then do it. If it doesn't, you kind of walk away. Yeah.
Well, I honestly, at this point with what you're doing with the Baron von Bielski Orchestra, I'm perfectly happy with what you're putting out, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of the songs
Thanks.
on this upcoming album. Eddie, you have any parting words before we end this?
I just want to say, just cycling back around to what we were saying about, being surprised. I was on my way home from work just the other day, and I just stuck on the Bare Sedatives EP. And when I got the Flying Monkeys,
I knew
holy
it.
shit. like I just heard that and thought, I love this. I have no idea what's going on, but I love it. And I'm just driving along with my face melting off my head.
Oh man, thanks. Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt that we have Marco Miniman playing drums on that. Who?
Wow.
So, I don't know if you guys know Marco, but he plays with the Aristocrats, and like he's just this insane. So it was one of those tracks where it's not a traditional song. So we were talking about it, and I was just so thrilled, to work with him. I was like, just go nuts. Like I know normally like there's song structures and things you got to worry about. I was like, this is one of those kind of, and I say it with all due respect to knowing I am not Frank Zappa, but I meant it was Zappa-esque. It's got this tongue-in-cheek insanity to it. So if anybody can go nuts on this and make it, and some of the stuff when I got his tracks back, I mean, you just have to start laughing because it's like the most overplayed insanity in a great way. In a musical way where he's changing everything up and it's inverting on top of itself and just so much fun. So that's been the greatest thing about the solo stuff is just getting to work with these different musicians and hearing, what they bring to the table on songs. So for me, it's been like this amazing collaborative kind of thing. Andy Blacksugar, who plays with, he plays with Blondie on tour and he plays with KMFDM. He was Peter Murphy's guitar player forever. Just a genius and a right-hand guy. And Edu Kumanado, who played a bunch of drums on stuff, and Ricky Sanders, and not to name drop, but I always feel like there's such a huge part of the process for this stuff because it's like you never hand them something and then that was my big concern when I did the record, was just I asked all my friends, and it was right when the pandemic started. And I assumed like of my 23, 24 guys, 3 would say yes and everybody else would be occupied. It turned out everybody was home. So I like to say it's because of my singular genius and the opportunity to work with me, but the pandemic and everybody being bored might have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But then I was starting to think, oh my God, like if I asked David Ellefson to play on a track or Benji from Skindred to sing or Bumblefoot for that matter, and I don't like what they do, it's going to be like so awkward. I'm going to have to, how do you call up Bumblefoot and say, well, that's not what I had in mind. But the thing I realized is when you're dealing with guys of that much talent, it's like, you're getting the coolest, like, shit back. It was so like every time I'd open a file, I'd be like, oh my God, like I would have never thought to do that way. And just in awe of how cool their ideas are. So that is what still excites me about doing this. And it's been a real fun process. So.
Yeah, that honestly, that's the only thing that I miss doing music on my own now, because I've given up band life, but I do miss that collaborative thing. And I don't have really great musician friends. So, but anyway, it's what I'm looking forward to it for whoever's watching this, the Baron von Bielski Orchestra, or just you can look up Jason Bieler. It leads you to it on the internets, but highly recommend all of the shit that, and of course Saigon Kick, because that's what brought us all together here in the first place. We're truly honored to have you on the show, sir, and to be our first guest, not only be somebody that I'm interested in talking to so much, but also you've given so much more than like I would even ask for. So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
guys,
thanks, dude.
I can't thank you enough. One, for just seeing you when you did the Saigon Kick stuff. It was a blast, and I enjoyed it. And your rewrite of the Sick riff lyrics, it really. Sometimes you have an opportunity in life, and I made that left. If I would have went right like you wanted me to, the whole thing would be different right now. It would have been a Harry Styles like tune. It would have really gone the full mile.
That's what I need to do. I'm going to send Eddie my lyrics and just be like, look, just fuck it up somehow and send it back to me.
I'm going to run everything by Eddie from this point forward. He's going to be on constant like these lyrics. What do you think?
Yeah.
But, you guys have been a blast and an honor, and I wish you tremendous success, obviously with the band, Eddie, and everything about
Thanks,
it. So anytime. Let's do it again in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. And have a good rest of your day.
You too, guys. Take care, man.
All right. Thanks.
Later, dude.